Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Science on the Sound speaker series. Today, we have two guests with us that I'm super excited. If you do not know, Redondo has been having a lot of fun along with the city of Des Moines, and it all has to stem with six-gill sharks. And so today we have a talk all about diving with six-gill sharks and exploring the depths of Des Moines, Washington. And so we have Rus Higley, who is the director of the MaST Center Aquarium. And then we also have Carlos, who is part of Underwater Sports and Federal Way. Both have dove Redondo quite a few times and have some experience with these super cool animals that are called six-gill sharks. But I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to let the experts talk about these super cool creatures. So Rus, Carlos, take it away.
All right. Thanks for having. Glad that we could do this and share about some of the fun that we're going to see. So I want to share a little bit of a presentation about six gills, and then we're going to have a discussion with Carlos about diving and the like. So, right. So diving with six-gills, exploring the depths in Des Moines. For those that don't know me, my name is Rus Higley. I'm the director of Highline College's MaST Center Aquarium. I've been a marine biologist for over 30 years, over 1,000 dives, and I'm going to actually introduce Carlos a little bit later. So we'll come back to him. So let's see, hopefully this all works. So when most people think of six-gills, or excuse me, of sharks, I think most people kind of go to this. And this, I think, is really appropriate. It's actually the 50th anniversary of this movie. Talked to some old timers that were around when this came out. The next day, the beaches were empty because this scared people away. So that's the trailer. The reality is, for six-gills, this is more what it's like. This video was taken by a local diver, Randy Williams, and as you can see, it was at a depth of 90 feet, 8:30 in the morning. So the note said the diver was spinning rapidly. Fast speed for a scuba diver is probably about 2.5 miles per hour. So, although leisurely, I mean, it is obviously pretty slow. It's just cruising along. All right. So I want to introduce the six-gill shark. So this is a deep water shark species. Usually they are at submarine depth, so up to 1.5 miles in depth. They're rarely seen by people, except by scuba divers at Redondo. We'll talk more about that in a bit. These are large sharks. Females can be up to 20 feet. Males are a measly 12 foot long. We commonly see 3 to 8 foot individuals at Redondo. One of the cool facts is they have this almost iridescent green or blue eye. You can see hints of the blue in this photo. And then they have 6 gills. Most sharks have 5, and that's actually kind of this is an early shark. So this is kind of one of their base models, if you will. So Redondo is literally the best place in the world to see. They show up in late spring and stay until early fall. Divers have been seeing them for a couple weeks now here at Redondo. They're known for that slow, deliberate swim that you saw in the video. They're listed as near threatened by the IUCN, and their population is noticed as decreasing. And here in Washington State, they're listed as a species of greatest conservation need. So this is another just shorter video by another diver, Ed Wilkinson. And you can see that the sharks don't care. And if you've ever been around predators, top of the food chain, don't really care about everyone else. They're also known as cow sharks, and I think with that last view, you can kind of see why, with that blunt nose. So why Redondo? Why Des Moines? Right? Why the Puget Sound? So Puget Sound is considered a nursery ground for these. Again, the ones we're seeing are smaller. 2 to 8 foot is typically what we're seeing. And a 6 to 8 foot shark is in the order of 300 to 400 pounds. So again, even though small, these are still large animals. When they grow larger, they move out to the open ocean. There's been some tracking that has been done with them, and again, the tracking basically tracks them out to the deep ocean, and then they lose the signal at that stage. One of the reasons maybe we see them at Redondo is because divers are looking for them. If you can kind of imagine, if no one's looking or no one is diving at a certain location, maybe they're there and just there's no one to see them. Redondo is one of the top dive sites. So Ariel had mentioned this. Des Moines, Washington is the Sixgill Shark Capital of the world. And July 6th, which happens to be tomorrow, is Sixgill Shark Day. That's a citywide event. And here at the MaST, we're going to be celebrated with an event called Shark in the Park. So if you are watching this on July 5th or 6th and you can be down in Redondo, come celebrate it with us between 11 and 4 up in Wooten Park, which is right up just across the way from us. Why July 6th is it builds on existing Shark events such as Shark Week, Shark Awareness Day on July 14th, Shark Month, July. And so July 6th, I think they kind of make some sense with the 6 gills. So why did Des Moines become the Sixgill Shark Capital of the world? Why take these steps? So again, it's believed that the global population is in decline. The Puget Sound is believed to be the nursery ground or one of the nursery grounds for these. And if you can imagine, nurseries have an outsized impact, right? Protecting the young is one of the best ways to protect this fish that's often caught through bycatch, unintentional catch. There's concerns over human impacts. Locally, we're talking about divers and their interactions. Generally, they're benign, but that doesn't always mean that. Fishermen catching them, we actually know numerous stories of fishermen targeting other species here at Redondo, Tacoma, the nearby areas, and accidentally catching 6-gill sharks. And then also impacts of pollution. There are concerns over human-shark interactions. One of them is a term called baiting, or more specifically, chumming. And this is where you put dead fish in the water as a way to attract sharks. This is done in areas around the world for drawing in for like tourism. But one of the big issues with this is if you ask any wildlife manager around the world, feeding wildlife almost always results in negative impacts. There was a recent story here in Washington State of a woman that was feeding raccoons and in Kitsap Harbor or Kitsap Peninsula across the water from the MaST. And eventually she had 80 animals. And then the story goes that she quit feeding them, or somehow they got upset and they were terrorizing her, making wild animals think people are a source of food, I think you can imagine has some negative impacts. So why Redondo in terms of as a dive site? So Redondo is one of the top dive sites in Puget Sound. Sea Dock Society did a study. Number two, I think West Seattle is the top one. On a busy weekend, you can see 100 plus divers down there. We have 3 dive shops within 4 miles, so 8, and TLC, which are both in the city limits, and Underwater Sports in Federal Way, which is where Carlos is from. And then there's a brand new um, combined snack shop, bathroom, and outdoor shower building here in our city's parking lot. So it makes it much easier to dive. So I want to bring in Carlos. And so for those that don't know Carlos, he's the manager of Underwater Sports in Federal Way. He's diving 3 times a week. I would probably guess even more. Has over 1,000 dives, with the majority open water certification, followed by advanced rescue, open water instructor, master scuba diver. Right? I mean, he knows it all. I've got over 1,000 dives as well, but I have not gone the instructor route. And so I want to do is take this off as sharing, and have Carlos join. So hi, Carlos, you want to say hi and all
Yeah.
that?
Hey Russ, thanks for the introduction. 1,000 dives is a lot. I just actually hit my 2,200 dive the other
Oh,
month, so pretty big accomplishment. But I've been loving it. Thanks for the introduction again.
yeah. So what I want us to do is kind of the rest of this session. We're going to talk about sharks, but we want to more talk about diving. And so one of the really cool things is, so I'm a recreational diver by training that does science stuff. So I have a scientific certification. I collect for Highline College's MaST Center, where Carlos, runs a shop. He was, I know last weekend was teaching students, I assume, and actually this week he had some students in the water as well. So Carlos, let's actually kind of talk about your voyage. So when did you get certified? When did you learn to dive?
Yeah, so I learned how to scuba dive 13 years ago, down in Tacoma.
Down in
Uh,
Tacoma. Okay.
yeah, another dive shop that's still around. They're called Tacoma Scuba. Highly
Yeah.
recommend them if you're in the area to seek them out, get some information. But yeah, I learned how to scuba dive down there and then started diving in the Tacoma area. And man, I really fell in love with the water scene in Tacoma. So that sort of was the start of the career. Once I found out about Redondo, dove it for my first time, I was sold.
I, what made you sign up for the class?
You
Why'd you do
know,
it?
I got it as actually a experience. I got gifted the experience to try it in a pool. So no commitment, just jump in a pool with some professional trained divers, and they showed me my first breath underwater, and I was hooked.
Gosh, I remember during my class, I got certified up in Bellingham, and had to um our 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 shop had its own pool and had to do extra pool time. And I remember just sitting on the bottom of the pool trying and failing to blow bubble rings. I don't know. Can you blow bubble rings?
I can, but they're a challenge. When you do
Yeah.
it, your mask tends to fog up, so you have to choose cool bubble ring or a flooded mask.
Nice, nice. So so you got open water certified. Tell me about your the pathway that you went into becoming a better diver, and if you kind of that what do the classes mean in terms of better diver versus or an instructor sort of
Yeah.
pathway?
Oh, most definitely. So I started off as an open water diver, which allows you to dive to 60 feet of depth and daytime dives only. So there's a little bit of restriction, but just to keep everyone safe. Once I started diving new areas, I wanted to experience more. Obviously, a lot of the dive life comes out at night, so night dives were one of the first things I wanted to do. So then I switched and took my advanced class, which certified me for deeper depths course. I honed some other skills on night diving, so I was able to do that. And then once I was able to dive at night, I got to see giant Pacific octopus that was at Redondo at that time, and that was a scene to see at night. After you take your advanced, though, you are ready to go to rescue class, which rescue is teaching self-rescue and as well as how to rescue other divers in the water. Once you complete that course, you can start your professional classes, which that means if you want to become a dive master to assist the classes that I was teaching this last weekend at Redondo, that would be the first class. After your dive master, you would slowly progress to instructor, and you can keep on going from there until you can train other instructors.
Cool. And I mean, so you said 12 years, 2,200 dives. I mean, you're approaching am I right? 200
Yeah.
high hundreds of dives a year. That's right. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I've got over 1,000 dives, but I've been diving for 30 years. So you can, Carlos is a monster for diving.
Yeah.
So
I think this last week I did 9 dives. So
okay.
so
Um, so who can who can get certified?
anyone, as long as they're over the age of 12 years old. 12 is the minimum requirement to become a junior open water certified diver. Once you turn 14, that junior open water diver turns into a standard open water diver to 60 feet. So really, the age range can start as early as 12. And honestly, we're certifying people in their late 60s, even early 70s, and they're still out there diving today, which is pretty admirable and really cool to see.
Yeah. Now you are the manager of Underwater Sports in Federal Way.
Yes.
So Underwater Sports has 3 shops, 4 shops?
We have 5 right now.
5. Okay.
Um, we have 5 starting in Tacoma, and we reach all the way to Edmonds. You'll find us near a lot of bodies of water, but yeah, we're a little bit everywhere. Bellevue, Seattle, of course, this store, the Federal Way, and Edmonds and Tacoma.
Yeah. And then we mentioned there's a couple other shops. And so in terms of certifications, are they all doing, at least for the open water level, they're all doing about the same certification, right?
Yes, yeah. So all the certifications have to be accepted across the board, like most standardized training certifications. And so if you go to my shop or you go to 8 or TLC right down the road, when you get your open water certification, you will be able to dive the same limits as your other open water divers.
And so I get a lot of requests for, for which shop. And I always just say is go into the shops and talk to them.
Yeah.
Who do you feel comfortable with, right? You're to some level putting your life in their hands. And
Yeah.
it's a relationship, right? Like I've been working with Carlos for more than a decade. And I've been working with underwater sports for, longer than that, right? And I
Mhm.
have good relationships with 8 and TLC as well. And so they're all really cool shops. And there's other shops further out in the field, sort of thing.
Of course.
So um enough of the kind of the nerd side. So what was your coolest, and let's start with non-shark. What's your coolest dive experience? What's the story that you love to share?
Man, probably one of my favorite stories. We were up in the San Juan Islands, just doing a recreational fun dive on a boat charter. And we're at this pinnacle rock. And this pinnacle rock, you can only dive certain times of the day because the currents can get outrageously strong to where we can't safely dive it. So we all dropped, it's a group of 12 divers, and we started diving at this wall. We get to about 80 feet, and we noticed there's a weird bump on the wall. We didn't know what it was because the clarity wasn't the best. So as we swim closer to it, we realized it's a giant Pacific octopus hunting. And this male or female, it was a big octopus. I mean, arm span had to be over 20 feet long. It was just covering every crevasse it can with its arms and searching for any life. And we were able to just experience this. Well, as we were experiencing it, one of my buddies had a little bit of buoyancy control issues and they started going up. Well, as she started going up, she was face to face with this octopus. And that octopus thought she was the most either best dive buddy or just was very curious because he attached and held on to her and started wanting to become best friends, apparently. So now you have this giant Pacific octopus about 8 other divers trying to hold all their arms, trying to let this diver go up. And we're all laughing to the point where our masks are flooding with water. Because once we take a suction cup off, another suction cup sticks to you. And it was a really cool experience. We just got to see how intelligent and how mindful these octopus were to us divers. We obviously were not in our element. We were in their world, so we're trying to be as respectful as we can. But that entire experience, it was just, it was surreal. It was neat. None of us felt in danger at all. And we got to see one of the biggest octopus in the world. And honestly, it was more curious of us than we were of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I know people ask, in terms of, right, are they dangerous, right?
Mhm.
And kind of the way I say is as long as you kind of keep your cool, that the danger
Yeah.
is if you don't keep your cool
Hmm.
rather than the actual animal, right?
No, for sure. Yeah. If you respect the marine life out there, it has no reason to harm you or seek you or do anything. It's just there to observe. And if we just respect that boundary between the divers and the marine life, it's a good experience. And it's you rarely see anything happen. We're noisy. We make a lot of noise and a lot of movement underwater. A lot of the life doesn't like to see that. So if we can just hang out and coexist with them, it's a good time.
So now, obviously, I started this about talking about sharks. So let's
Hmm.
talk about some sharks.
Yeah.
So tell me the like kind of like one of your cool favorite, because how many times have you seen Six Skills?
I've actually only seen him less than 3 times in my entire career.
Yeah, I'm at 3 too. So you're right.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's becoming more common. We're
Mhm.
at Redondo, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
I mean, and didn't didn't last week your class, like your dive master and two of the students saw a six gill? Is that
They did. And at a very unusual place, but there's nothing to be fearful of it. So these divers were at 40 feet at Redondo on dive 2 of their open water class. And the two divers were looking around, looking to see if anything was behind them. And they can just see this 4, maybe 5 foot 6 shark starting to approach them. By the time they can turn around and grab a hold of their dive master, the leader, he turned and the Sixgill shark started swimming away. And it was just that fast. It was just curious.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll hear, obviously lots of different stories. As a diver, we're usually going to see them in I say 70 to 90 foot range.
Hmm.
But as an open water diver, we're maxing at, 90 to 100 feet, right? Like literally my deepest dive is 105 feet. I know you've been deeper than that.
Hmm.
So in other words, if they're deeper, right, and they obviously are, most divers aren't seeing them. And so,
Correct.
right, they've got to come to scuba diver depths for us
Hmm.
to see them. And one of the interesting things with diving is you're on a closed amount of air, right? You have a tank of air. And the deeper you go, the quicker you consume your air because of pressure.
Hmm.
And so, at 20 feet, I can stay for an hour and a half on a tank of air. At 90 feet, I've got like 5 or 10 minutes. Right. So we're going
Yeah.
looking diving, right? Like tomorrow, I know both of us are going diving, and we're gonna go look for sharks tomorrow.
Hmm.
And I'm taking a new diver with me. And so obviously the priority of that dive will be taking care of the new diver.
Correct.
Um, and she'll go through air faster because she's a new diver, right? This is a skill that you learn. So tell me about your shark experience, all right? One of your stories.
Yeah. So, like the shark story I just told about a class scenario, and we saw some sharks. I saw my first shark during a advanced open water class at Redondo Beach. So we're
Did
planning
you teach
on.
this class or you were in the class?
So I was actually filling in as the teacher for this one dive, and it was the deep dive of the class. We were planning on going to the carousel horse boat, which is down the deep line at Redondo. Usually we'll sit at around 80 to 90 feet, depending tide. And we were just planning on going to see the boat, turning around and coming right back up, depending on air. And right as we were approaching that carousel horse boat, we see 2 other lights start flickering in the distance. We couldn't tell what it was, so we just kept an eye on it. All of a sudden, these two lights start facing at us, and we come to find out they're following a six-gill shark that was about 6, 7 feet long. And that female just comes right to us and goes right between two of my students. I was above them and I was about to leap on top of these students, but the shark showed no signs of aggression. It just casually passed right through, just saying almost excuse me, and just wanted to get right by. And it swam, touched one of the divers with its head just to move it by, and then just kept on going. And it was all of us were just in this just frozen state, but none of us were fearful, and we all just couldn't believe what we were seeing. Check on everyone. We start coming back up. We get to 70 feet, and the six-gill does another pass, just curious, about 20 feet away, and she just takes off, and we never see her again for the dive. So it was a pretty intense moment, especially during the class. But I had 4 students that just they have a story they'll stick with them for the rest of their lives now.
I like I said, I'd seen a couple times, and one of my favorite of them was there were 3 of us, and we were diving at Three Tree Point in Burien, and 2 of us were kind of heading along the topography, not changing depth, and one was kind of going up the hill, and the 2 of us going forward, the shark comes from in front of us, so we watch it come out, and we're trying to get our buddy's attention who's going perpendicular to our right, and can't get his attention. We're flashing lights at him, and you can make muffled noises, but they don't, as you know, they don't really hear. And the shark come and as a diver, you're floating usually 5 feet off the bottom, and that could be closer, that can be farther. Like Carlos was saying, he was above his divers, and my buddy was like 5, 6 feet off the bottom, going. My hands, I don't have enough to going this way, and the shark comes up underneath him, like if down, he would have saw a shark head.
Ooh.
And then the shark turns around and 180s and heads back the other way, and then he turns and sees the shark and is excited. But I'm like, man, looking down, and it was 2 feet beneath him at like his belly line. I just like, the joke about brown pants, right? That. And I remember, I mean, the very first time I saw a shark, which was not a six-gill, I was diving in Hawaii, and I caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye, enough that my brain recognized shark, and I remember the involuntary lizard brain going, "Yah!" And then I actually turned and looked at it, and it literally was a 6-inch shark, right? Like it's these things are cool. They're not, are there sharks that eat people? Yes, there are. You are more likely to die because a vending machine killed you than you are to be attacked by sharks. I mean, right? It's just it's so there just really isn't any risk from them, especially if you are nice, right? Like
Correct.
That's one of the cool things. So why is Redondo so popular from kind of like your perspective? Why is it such a cool?
Ooh, that's Redondo it's a very consistently safe site dive for recreational divers. So you can almost hit it at any time of the day and just fierce mild current, decent visibility, and always fun life to see. I mean, some of my favorite Puget Sound life is at Redondo. You have the red octopus, you have sculpins, sailfin sculpins, grunt sculpins, beautiful fish that are just perfect for photographers to take photos of. You have nudibranchs, wolf eels. I mean, all these cool lives. And of course, every summer we have right now the Sixgill shark, which is pretty amazing to see all at one site. You don't have to travel anywhere to go see all these unique specimens. You can just go to Des Moines and just jump in the water really easy.
When you mentioned like the wolf eel, and for those that don't know, these are fish. They're technically not an eel. They're not an eel. Let's put it that way. And that's just fin thing. Nerd. You got to be nerdy. If you want to be nerdy, talk to Emily. She'll got you there. But they get to be 7, 8 feet long. So these are fairly large fish, and their head is almost about the height of my head. So these are big fish. And like Carlos was actually took me on a dive at Redondo to show me the wolf eels, and we saw three of the four, I think, on that dive,
Mhm.
and they were all the juveniles. So Redondo is known for juvenile wolf eels. And what's cool is, or what's weird is the the habitat for them at Redondo is size limited, right? So we don't
Mhm.
get big ones at Redondo. So what happens to them? When where
Well,
do they go? Where do you think?
we usually see them just travel south or further west deeper. And just like Russ said, they're limited at Redondo for their habitat. So they have to find a structure that can accommodate them. Usually you're gonna look for bigger rock structure or something that they can hide in. They're an eel, so they can slither their body, or a fish, excuse me, but they have a body of an eel and they can slither into tight gaps. But um yeah, you can see them at Redondo from a juvenile state to about, I would say, maybe a 3 foot long wolf eel.
Yeah. Yeah. And those ones that you showed us are now gone. They've moved on.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's
Yeah,
the stuff's changing. There's very much seasonality at Redondo.
correct.
And I wouldn't say the Wolfield's seasonality, but you can still from one season to the next,
Hmm.
you don't always know. Now, what makes so if you could dive, I mean, you mentioned San Juans, right? Like why the San Juans? Why? I mean, that's a commute for you,
It
you
is
know.
commute, but up in the San Juan Islands, you get a lot more open ocean currents, and those open ocean currents bring a lot more nutrients into the water, which feeds the life. So when you're wanting to start seeing some more unique life that we don't see down here, you can head up to the San Juans, and there is a local dive charter called Bandito Dive Charter that will go up there and moor their boat for about a month. And if you can catch one of those charters, it would change your mind of cold water diving, and I can guarantee you.
Yeah, yeah. And if some of you may know your history, the inventor of scuba diving, Jacques Cousteau,
Mhm.
um, literally had the Puget Sound, the Salish Sea, or this area, the Pacific Northwest, and up into Canada, as like his third favorite place in the world to dive. And I'll freely admit, it's cold here. I'm a cold wuss. I get cold easy. And so I've got a dry suit. I've got dry gloves, right? Carlos, you have a heated vest
Oh
to go
yeah.
underneath your dry suit, right? I mean, this is not about suffering, this sport. It is a gear intensive sport. And then the visibility is often poor. And so, I mean, there's days, especially this time of year with the spring bloom, you're seeing visibility on a good day, it's 10 to 15 feet at this time of year, especially at Redondo. But yeah, no, man, you get up there, the king crab that we have up there,
Mhm.
Puget Sound king crab, and like you said, the octopus and stuff. I remember one time dropping on this reef structure, and I'm looking, and I'm kind of like looking small. I'm kind of looking for the trees, not the forest. And I finally focused back, and I realized this large lump on the thing was an octopus, right? I mean, it was like I used the analogy of like it was bigger than a 5 gallon bucket, its head sort of idea. So I don't know how big it was. And by the way, all divers exaggerate and lie. So just, I'll freely throw that in there. So yeah. Um, so you learn to dive, you're teaching students all the time. What's the hardest thing you had, and maybe what's the hardest thing students have to like, if I want to get diving, what do I, what's maybe going to be a couple of my stumbling blocks?
I would say probably the one of the hardest setbacks for a lot of our students, and even for me, this was the hardest skill I had to overcome, was feeling comfortable with a mask off your face while you're breathing through a regulator and having your head submersed underwater.
Yeah.
Sounds easy, but a
I
lot
know a
of,
lot of people that are terrified of that.
yeah, I mean, I would say it's almost like we will see about at least one or two students just really struggle every class, and that's okay because it's a voluntary reaction for you to survive. And breathing underwater, your brain just wants to tell you, like, this is not okay. You cannot survive. So you just have to relax, stay calm, and breathe through that regulator to reinforce for your brain to understand you're breathing. It's okay. Because everyone wants to hold their breath when they learn how to scuba dive. And it's us, we're having to try to reprogram our brain to allow us to breathe while we're underwater. So once you get past that,
Yeah.
it gets
Yeah. Carlos.
we reinforce skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the cold too, hitting your face is kind of a shock at times for people. And so yeah, that just breathing underwater. So Carlos is locked up for me. Emily Ariel, is he
Yeah, it looks like he's frozen.
okay? All right.
Not sure why.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he'll come back.
All right, I was
So,
gonna say,
Yeah.
while we wait for
yeah.
Carlos here, there he is.
Sorry about that.
No. Let's any questions? Have they if you have questions, you can post them.
Yeah, we've got questions.
Okay.
I mean, Russ answer actually gave a lot of questions that we had. Literally sticky notes rolled up now because he was already asking those questions, which is great. One of my big questions I have is it sounds like Redondo is a nursery ground for a lot of different animals. And with you two here, why do you think that is? Why do you think animals are coming to Redondo? And I guess more in this kind of subtidal zone that scuba divers are going in, that we can actually see kind of that starting of that life cycle here so often.
Carlos, you want to start?
Yeah. So I personally think as of late, we've been seeing Redondo blow up with all this new life forms because one, we're treating Redondo much better now than we have in the past in multiple ways. We're not illegal fishing at Redondo anymore. Back in the day, we've seen some poachers come through and impact the environment really bad by doing some malpractice like that. We've also, I personally think because of the lack of heavy current we get there compared to other sites around, smaller life forms can treat that as a good place to stay and create a habitat. But the park is also growing. We have some divers doing a lot of work building the park, creating new habitat for life that we can't or we don't see at other dive sites. There's a lot of rules that we can't do or set habitats for life. So we have partnered and we partner with some other divers to help them, and they're building some small structures at Redondo, which is pretty cool to see. So I do think that's helping a lot.
I do find it a little funny that you were talking about like the slow current being great for animals and how you equated that to also why it's good for like our young new divers to also be at Redondo. So it sounds
Yeah.
like it's good for both humans and the young animals too.
Yes.
And I so one of the interesting things is our area here at Redondo and a lot of Puget Sound is kind of a cobbly bottom, and so with small stones, which right if you think of a big anemone attaching or some animals attach, they need hard rock, they need non-moving sort of stuff, and we've kind of got that middle ground. And so like those red octopus that he mentioned earlier, they maximum of 12, 14 inches arm span, so they can tuck into that gravel, right? And there's what we call the bottle field at Redondo, where from historical, like there's antique bottles that got chucked into the water because I guess that's where they threw bottles back in the day. And so the bottles become habitat, for these octopus. And so it's I what I find is there's people that will dive Redondo, they're like, oh, I hated it. And I'm like, you didn't slow down, did you? And right, you've gotta, like you'll hear about macro photographers, right? You kind of almost have to have a macro scuba diving mindset where you're looking small, you know, like those wolf eels. Those are some of the biggest that we see, and they're little at Redondo, and usually you only see their face because they're peeking out of a hole. And so, yeah, it's right. It's a lot of small stuff, which is one reason why it's a really good, starter place.
So I have a question. We've talked a lot about Sixgills because we are now the Sixgill capital of the world. Are there any other sharks? Because I think a lot of people don't know that Sixgills live here or that any sharks live in the Puget Sound. Are there other sharks that you see diving here or that the public should know live here in this area?
So there are 11 or 12 total species that have been seen in the Puget Sound. But most are not seen by divers. The other common one, and actually I've seen way more of these, is what we call a dogfish. And so a dogfish is a 3 to 5 foot long shark. Fishermen will often catch them. They're actually, you have to be careful as a fisherman. They've got two spines on their dorsal fins that are like hypodermic needle sharp. And so the potential to get a stab by that is high. That's, so in other words, if you catch them, you can get stabbed. Other than that, there's no risk at all for them. Carlos, I've heard of a couple spottings, here and there by divers, but I haven't heard of other divers seeing, some of the others. I mean, there's seven gills, there's salmon sharks, there's threshers, there's basking sharks. But Errol, I know Errol has a good list of those. She could probably name off the other ones really quick.
Yeah, we've got taupe, also known as soup fin. We've got blue sharks, salmon sharks, great white sharks, cat shark. I think that's all that are missing. So yeah, 11 different species.
And wasn't the soup fin the one that like last year was a new find that the newspapers were covering the story of?
Yes, it was like another more like recent spotting, and it kind of seems like media is always just a little bit behind the scientists, that like the scientists were like, oh yeah, they're here, we know about them, and then the media is like, oh my gosh, brand new species. It was kind of funny, just a little bit of lag, but yeah, they're starting to become more frequent, as you all were talking about. Seeing some of these sixgills is now becoming more frequent in this area.
Another cool, and we talk about Redondo, right, in terms of diet. Redondo gets weird things. I mean, I know Carlos can tell you, but like one of the craziest things we saw at Redondo is a mola mola. And a mola mola is a sunfish. Like if you think of California, that's where mola molas are, or East Coast, it's a whale. It's a famous video of them. And divers saw them at Redondo. It's just mind blowing. Carlos, can you think of it? There's a couple other really weird stuff that we've seen.
Yeah, back in the day, one of my coworkers, he's the manager of our Tacoma location, Chris Fossey, and he saw a gray whale at Redondo at 30 feet.
Right off the end of our pier.
Right at the end of the pier. It was like a fall, I think it was a November dive, and visibility was pretty decent because with their GoPro, they were able to capture this entire whale swimming right by him, and it was pretty amazing. And actually, you ever go visit Chris in Tacoma Underwater Sports, you have to ask him about that experience.
Well, and I remember you showed me the video, and the divers are kind of following each other. So the back one has the GoPro, and the front one exhales. The bubbles are going up, and the whale dodges the bubbles.
Yeah.
So
it was that close.
And then you hear the camera guy go, underwater. It's oh my God, it's fun to watch. So yeah, because obviously divers can see whales underwater, but it's not very common.
So speaking, you both were talking about like this giant octopus, right? Of like, that's most people who are coming to this area, they're wanting to see a giant Pacific octopus. I mean, that's why Galloping Gertie, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge went down, was the giant Pacific octopus. It sounds like they're more dangerous / scarier to encounter than the sharks around here.
Yeah, I would say so. I wouldn't say scary, but they're more intelligent and curious. That's what I would say, because I haven't come across an octopus that has shown aggression towards a diver unless it was provoked. So that's just what I would say. But man, they get pretty big. But in all honesty, they're just as curious as we are. And when we get face to face with one of them, you can see that their brains are thinking on how to interact with us. And we're trying to do the same. And there has to just be one of us has to make a move. Once one of us makes a move, the other will react. And as long as we don't do anything to harm them, they usually react in a positive way. And then it becomes an experience and a memory you'll never forget.
Well, and also our octopus are getting bigger than the typical standard shark around here, correct? That our sharks, what's the max length around here, I guess, for a typical shark?
8 foot for a 6 gill. But I mean, arm span on an octopus, you're also talking a 50 to 75 pound animal where, that's 75 pound octopus has a 15-foot arm span ballpark sort of idea, where a 6 foot shark weighs 300 pounds. So it's bigger and smaller, depends on which dimension you're measuring.
Okay. It's still me, I don't know if seeing either one for the first time,
Well,
like the open water dive class, seeing a shark or a giant GPO with a 15-foot arm span. I think either would be just a little terrifying for the first time.
and so Ariel, Ariel's the only non-diver on this stream, right? Emily's been certified. Emily, you've been 4 years? 5?
Yeah, 2018 or 2019 was when I was certified. So
6 years.
six-ish.
So, Ariel, why aren't you a diver, especially given that you work at the MaST? What's your concern?
Well, I was a diver. I got certified in college, and it was a high elevation lake certification. So Flathead Lake, beautiful place to go and get certified. Found this little squatty crayfish inside the rocks there. I stopped diving, as like Carlos was talking about, some barriers to people getting introduced to diving. I was lucky enough that my school, University of Montana, allowed us to do diving for a PE credit, and we needed PE credits to graduate. And after that, though, I was a broke college student who was moving around trying to do internships, and it wasn't ever any place that had diving really, or I couldn't afford to be able to dive during that. So I guess this is one of my next questions is, what are some resources for people who are like me, who wanted to dive or who want to get into diving, but either can't afford the gear, as Russ was saying, it's a very equipment heavy sort of sport, or don't have the community around them that knows how to dive to like bring them in, or say I grew up in the Midwest. We didn't have this beautiful body of water behind us. We had rivers. So how do people get into this sport who have those barriers?
Yeah, so there's quite a few ways. I would recommend a lot of people taking a Discover Scuba course, which is just an introduction to a class if they can. I know if you're needing a community, we've been around since, gosh, it's been over 50 years since this company's been open. And we do have a dive club. Every store is independent, but my store here in Federal Way, we dive every week. We go out, whether you're open water or you're an instructor, you have 1 dive or 4 dives or 1,000 dives, you can join us. They're free to the community. We just ask that you have the proper experience and training to join these divers on these fun dives. And if you don't, we have a lot of instructors and passionate dive pros that would be willing to take you out on a dive after you're certified and just brush up on skills or just help you feel more comfortable in the water. But it is honestly we have a very active and accommodating community around the Puget Sound. I'm just talking about my store. I can only imagine 8th and TLC and every other dive shop. They probably have just as active a community, but you got to reach out to your local dive shop and talk to them first to get that. And so reaching out's the first step, and then we'll take care of every other step after that.
And I'll throw in a couple. One is there's also a Facebook group for Redondo called Thursday Night Diving at Redondo. And I think last I saw, it's got over 500 or 600 members in there, right? That are, again, people from all over, right? So they're not shop specific, so there's community. Ariel, I mean, in terms of the cost, it is, you're going to drop several $100s to get class, your basic open water, but it is only a couple $100, to get that certification, to see if you even like it. Right at that stage, now, like, can you start saving? So I bought my first gear when I was a poor college student, right? And I got really secondhand stuff and not necessarily the ideal way to do it, but it was what I did at the time. One of the things, if you do buy secondhand, you absolutely have to this is your life support system. Because especially Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, you can find that stuff. Some of that stuff is really sketchy. I know Carlos gets some of that craziness into his shop to fix. This is your life support. But I got first certified in the early 90s. I bought cheap gear then. In the around 2000, I bought my current gear. So my current gear I bought 25 years ago. So, and I'm still using it, right? So it is, again, it's an expensive to get into, but if you go, you need batteries for your light and you need an air fill. That's kind of your cost each time you dive, sort of thing. It's so once you get your gear, it gets cheaper. It's the way, it's not like it's that people go snow skiing and every time they go up to this, Snoqualmie or Stevens, they're dropping $75 for a lift ticket or $100 for. It's not that. Your air card is how much is a 10 punch, Carlos?
It's gonna be $90.
$90. So $9 a fill. So every air tank you go is $9. So, and there is some annual maintenance and stuff like that, but that's relatively cheap.
And is that your dry suit or a wetsuit?
I bought, well, I've had two dry suits in my career. One that leaked like a sieve, that was in my used phase. That was not ideal. But again, my current one, and like mine is nothing fancy. The dry suit is where you can drop a lot. And Emily can attest, she's been diving wet. And
Yep.
and wet works, especially in the summer. It's harder for repetitive dives. So if you want to dive one dive and you want to do it in the winter, that's easy. You want to dive 3 dives in a day, that's a hard day. I would not be happy in that sort of thing. And so, for example, I did a dive trip up to Vancouver Island about a year and a half ago, and we for 5 days we were no 4 days we were diving 3 times a day. You for that you need a dry suit sort of thing. And I joke I've got the best cheap dry suit. And again, it's lasted 20 years.
And Carlos, is there a special certification you need to be able to use a dry suit? Because I know most scuba that people do, especially around the world, is in a wetsuit. So dry suit would be very different.
Yes, it would. There's a little bit more training involved in a dry suit since we're now having to adjust our buoyancy in both our buoyancy compensator device is our harness and our bladder, and then we have our dry suit that an air bubble can shift anywhere around the body. So there's a little bit of training, but you can tack that onto an open water certification, which is your beginner open water certification, and you can you can do both certifications at once. It's up to you. I would recommend that if I could do it all over again, I would save up just $300 and take the certification and enjoy the water more. But I dove over a year in a wetsuit and I absolutely loved it because of the simplicity of a wetsuit versus a dry suit.
It's for those of them joining who, again, no experience scuba diving. This might be their first talk. They're curious. What is the difference between a wetsuit and a dry suit? I know like one is wet, one is dry, but like I guess the more mechanics behind it.
Yeah, so the dry suits are comprised of material that will keep you dry, as well as we have seals that seal our neck and our wrist, so we don't have any water flow. And so by doing that, it's keeping your body more warm. Now, a wetsuit, how that works is you have neoprene and you're trying to capture water inside of that suit and let your body temperature heat that up. And that's what keeps you warm throughout your dive. So those are the two main differences. I mean, other than in a dry suit, you do get to wear the most comfortable fleeced onesies. And you'll see most divers at dive sites wearing a fashionable onesie of some sort.
Or like you, a heated vest.
Oh yeah, the heated vest is a must now.
Awesome. I got another question. Both of you were just talking about your experience diving and diving Redondo quite a bit. And both of you were joking that you've only seen Sixgill sharks 3 times, both of you. So more diving does not equate to more opportunities to see Sixgills.
Yeah, not necessarily.
And the Sixgills, we're hearing more and more reports of them over, like it's becoming more. So in the last 5 years, it's really exploded. And some of that appears to be a shark shift, and some of that appears to be a diver awareness, right? So if more divers are intentionally going to the depths at the times, right? Like the best time to see sharks is late at night at 70 to 90 feet. But again, more divers are diving and going to go look for them. So, right. So there's a dive tomorrow planned to go look specifically for six gills. And multiple divers are doing that. So I think there's two things happening in parallel that's causing more. And one of the reasons I haven't seen them is most of my dives are actually for work. So I'm diving to collect animals, to do pump maintenance on our stuff. And so I'm rarely just going to look for sharks. I'm going to speak for Carlos. Carlos is almost all the time teaching. And so he's not, if Carlos and I go dive, for looking for six gills, that's a completely different sort of dive, right? You're not having to take care of anything. You're not worried about collecting anything. You're just having to take care of yourself. And you've got, another person that's comfortable. Emily's done dives with us and those sorts of things. And so, right. So that's I think a big thing. So, if I got out a dozen times this summer, I would bet money that I would add at least one sighting to my checklist, and probably several.
So, Russ, you're talking about different types of reasons to dive, and that you've done it for work and done it for fun. What are some of the things for either of you that go into planning a dive? If say I got certified, I want to go plan a dive. How do you do that when you're looking at a different site?
So
yeah, go ahead, Russ.
so the one is, what time do you have, right? If you've got, you came home from work, it's an evening, you've got a couple hours, and you live close to a dive site like Redondo, you go jump in the water. It's, again, like Carlos mentioned, it's not a current intensive site, which means you don't have to plan for currents. If you are diving something like Tacoma Narrows or Fox Island East Wall, that's a current intensive site, you have to plan the tides. And basically, you're looking for the exchange where it goes from a flood to an ebb, and what we call slack water. So you're looking for that slack water, but that slack water only occurs at a certain time, and certain times of the months are better or worse than that. And so, so if we want to go dive Fox Island, a current site, I'm going to start looking a month ahead, and I've also got a longer drive. If I want to go up to the San Juans, I've got to get a charter because you want to use a boat, right? I mean, so can you shore dive it? Do you need a boat? If you need a boat, do you have a boat, right? And I don't have a boat, so I either need people with boats or I need to pay money to get on a boat. Yeah, Carlos?
Yeah, no, those are all great points. Experience will be another thing I would ask the diver. What's their experience? What they might like to see. Time is always the most, that's probably the hardest factor for divers. I tell every diver it takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete a dive. So you have to be able to accommodate for that. But yeah, I go for comfort level is probably the most important thing for me. I'm going to put a diver in the water. I want to make sure they understand the dive plan as well as I do, and I'm not putting them into any situation they might not be ready for.
And 2 to 3 hours includes prep and
Yes.
breakdown, right? Like, you're in the water for, depending on depth and skill, you're in the water for 30 to 60 minutes. That's your actual dive, assuming a single tank. But it's that setup. And then afterwards, you need to sit around for an hour and tell stories about all the cool things you saw.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it looks like we're just about at time. Let's do one last quick question is, what is your favorite site to dive, not including Redondo? And then if Redondo is your favorite site to dive, why is it your favorite?
All right. That's a really loaded question, but I'm going to narrow it down. Right now, I will have to say Saltwater State Park or Sun Rock in the Hood Canal would be my two favorite dive sites. For me, the reason why I like them, they're both marine preserves. One's a state park and Sun Rock's a marine preserve. So it allows a lot of the life to flourish, to grow to their full size. So when I go to Saltwater State Park, I'm not lying when I see lingcod just about the same size as I am, and I'm only 5'6". I'm not that tall, but they can just be as long as I am sometimes, or look to be that big underwater. And then in the Hood Canal, you can see multiple mates of wolf eels in dens. multiple giant Pacific octopuses on a single given wall, layered on top of each other. I mean, it looks like it's a hotel or an apartment building underwater for these creatures, but it's a good spot. And because they're both marine preserves, you won't have to worry about any other factors like boaters or fishermen accidentally trolling over you. So it's a very safe spot to dive.
I'll just throw in a quick one, and this, if he's going to be local, I'll go afield. And so, if you have the chance to go to Hawaii, there's a lot of diving there. If you're on the island of Maui, there's a ton of shore diving. So, you can rent your own gear, assuming you're trained, right? And you can just go dive after dive after dive. And warm water diving is a much simpler, right? You're not doing a dry suit. The gear is smaller and stuff, and so it's almost like vacation diving for us. And so it, in some ways, it has really cool life. In some ways, actually, our life's better. But just for a difference, like if you want to see sea turtles, right? You're going to Hawaii. You're not seeing them at Redondo. So that's where I'll put my other dive. I could name several around here though.
Well, thank you both for joining us for Science on the Sound. I definitely learned a lot about six-gill sharks, but also diving. Might convince me to get back into the water maybe in the future. But one last thing is six-gill sharks. We're the six-gill shark capital of the world. Will we see you all diving and trying to see these sharks soon? Besides, I know tomorrow with our big dive that we're doing, but are you all going to go try to see these now world famous sharks?
Definitely. So
Nice. Awesome. Well, for those of you who are viewing this, and hopefully it is before July 6th, because 6th of July is Sixgill Shark Day here in Des Moines. We will have Shark in the Park, which we're super excited for. We'll have an unveiling of the new Sixgill Shark sign here in the Plaza of Redondo. We will also have food trucks and music and vendors and dive shops. So if you want to come say hi to Carlos will be there. Russ and I and Emily will be running around. Come talk to us. Nerd out on shark facts. We'll even have shark bingo too if you want to win some prizes. And then also the MaST Center is now open on Sundays, also Saturdays and Sundays for the summer, July through August. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't do a helpless pitch here, but we are doing our underwater photography challenge again this year, which starts in August. So from August through October, take photos here at Redondo, submit them to our underwater photography challenge, and you might get to see them up on the wall here, which I know this last year we had tons of six-gill sharks and octopus displayed and exhibited here. So follow us on our social media, Highline, MaST Center Aquarium, or visit our website to see all of the upcoming dates and events and programs that we have going on at mast.highline.edu. Anything else, Emily, before we go?
I think that sounds great.